You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
Could have been anything that we wanted to be, and it's not too late to change. I'd be delighted to give it some thought. Maybe you'll agree we really ought to. 3, 4. We could have been anything that we wanted to be. Yes, that decision was ours. It's been decided we're weaker divided. Let friendship double up our powers.
You will probably find this hard to believe, but I was not the class clown in high school. I actually went to high school and studied and learned and got good grades and graduated with honors. And I watched the class clowns and I watched those guys goof off and get disciplined and end up in detention and such, and I just that didn't quite appeal to me. I was not into that. I reserved my being funny for on stage, and I got heavily involved in drama in high school. Obviously, I'm a drama nerd, and one of the offshoots of that was joining or creating an improv group that toured around the elementary schools while I was still in high school, senior year. And that sort of ignited something in me. Now, growing up, my generation, the one before me, we idolized Saturday Night Live. It was where we got most of our touchstones of comedy pop culture, you can tell how old somebody is by what Saturday Night Live cast they idolized. Now, the sad part is that I enjoyed the original players: Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, Gilda Radner, Garrett Morris. I that was on in syndication. It was on Channel 5 about 11:30 most nights. They had packaged it either into an hour or a half hour. Rarely did they replay the full 90 minutes. And a lot of times, due to legal wrangling, they eliminated the musical guest. So you were just getting comedy. And then I discovered on my own that, hey, this show was still on the air and you could enjoy it. Now, the sad part is that the season that I got heavily into SNL was arguably the worst cast ever. And I'm talking about Robert Downey Jr., Anthony Michael Hall, Randy Quaid, Joan Cusack, Terry Sweeney. Not a well-remembered cast. One of the absolute worst. And the weird part is that I taped a lot of the episodes on beta and watched them over and over again. Now, that season begat 0 catchphrases. Nobody was on the schoolyard pretending to be any of those characters. And it wasn't until a year or 2 years later when they probably the next year, when they added in John Lovitz. And John Lovitz was doing Tommy Flanagan, which was the liar character. Yeah, that's the ticket. I'm dating Morgan Fairchild. Right. And Lovitz was the beginning of the resurgence and the renaissance of SNL. And I'm not here to get into an SNL history. That's another full hour. But part of that was the 1985 season that was so bad opened with Madonna, and then Pee Wee Herman hosted in support of his movie. And I had discovered Pee Wee Herman through the movie, but mainly through the Pee Wee Herman show, not the Saturday morning show. That wouldn't premiere until 86. But before that, there was this very strange children's show that was meant for adults called the Pee Wee Herman Show. And it starred him and Paul Rubin and John Paragon and Edie McClurg, among others. And it was this kind of dirty, kind of not kids show run amok. And we got it. They showed it on HBO one night, and then it was released on VHS in one of those hard plastic white cases. And I just remember my friends and I discovered this one late Saturday night, me and Eric Hardy and Larry Burnett, and like this was just comedy gold. Like here was a guy that was he echoed Andy Kaufman a bit in that we don't know where the character ended and he began. Now, I've since met Paul Rubens, and not to digress again and say that my adulation of Paul Rubens and the Pee Wee Herman character warrants a complete hour on itself. But the shorthand is that when I discovered that he had come out of a comedy theater in L.A., in Hollywood, called the Groundlings, I was intrigued. And the more I heard about the Groundlings, and the more like you hear that Phil Hartman and Cassandra Peterson and Lorraine Newman and all these people are coming out of the Groundlings, and it's an open school. You can just go down and be a Groundling. At least that's what I thought. So I did a full improv tour, and I've got an episode coming up where we'll get into the full history of my insane improv days with my friend Jeff Whiteman. But I'm looking forward to that. But after that it ended and I was on my own, I looked to the Groundlings, and I decided to go down and you have to audition. And basically the audition is to see, like, if you got any comedy chops. And I think because, due to what they charge, I think you'd have to be pretty lethargic not to be accepted into the Groundling school. And I made it, fairly easy because the stuff they were doing was stuff that I had been doing for years. It was second nature. Now, the Groundlings, if you're not aware, is the West Coast equivalent of Second City, where they run a school, they teach improv, they teach sketch comedy and characters, and anybody can go down and make a go at it. And some of the biggest names in comedy and entertainment have run through these schools. There's also like IO West and Second City West. There's a whole bunch of really amazing, very talented schools. But because of the Pee Wee Herman connection, I wanted to be a Groundling. And then, later on, by the time I entered the school, 1995, they had also had Mike Myers and Julia Sweeney come out of the Groundlings. So they had a really good pedigree. And when you entered the theater, you were on comedy ground, hallowed comedy ground, as far as if you idolized comedians. And I did, because I always, I wanted to be funny. I wanted to learn the craft. And I'd already been well on my way through my regular improv. So stepping into the Groundlings seemed like the natural thing. And I just, like everybody who crossed the threshold into that theater and into those classrooms, my goal was join the company, become a Groundling full-fledged, and if I was lucky, get an SNL audition and try my luck at becoming an SNL performer. This is before anybody had come out of SNL and written a book. And now that I've read Jay Moore's book about what it was like at SNL and some of the other accounts like Norm Macdonald's, in hindsight, I don't know if I would have hacked it at SNL. I don't know. They might have eaten me up and spit me out, or I might have ended up killing somebody in a rage of stress and terror. Because for me, nothing matters except what makes it to the stage. And what trips everybody up, including myself, is the backstage politics and the antics. But I went down and auditioned for the Groundlings and got accepted right away. And it was the last thing that my mom paid for before she died. She saw what it meant, and it was quite expensive. And each step costs, and then you take the classes. So the first class she paid for, and I had a great time learning. Our teacher was Jim Jackman. And at the time, Jim Jackman literally had a Carl's Jr. commercial running. So walking into the class, it was like, oh my God, a working actor is going to teach me. And then I'd find out later that Jim Jackman has a line of dialogue in Spaceballs. He's the guy when they're debating the assholes on the bridge. He's the guy who says, "He's my cousin, sir." And the minute I recognize people. That's what I do. I was like, dude, you're in Spaceballs, man. That's got to be the greatest. He's like, yeah, Jeff, that was almost 10 years ago. Let's do class. And the first things they teach in Groundlings is just basic improv stuff, It's listening on stage and paying attention and reacting instead of acting and living in the scene. And I'd learned all of that already. So the first class was quite easy for me, and Jim was very complimentary. And one of the biggest compliments I got was on the final day of class. Everybody went out for drinks afterwards, and when I walked in, Jim was like, "Hey, that's Tucker. That's the funniest guy I've ever met." And I just was like, "Oh my God, that makes me feel so like gratified. Like I'm humbled that you would say that." And it really felt good. And I felt like the Groundlings were a pretty good fit for me because I wanted to work hard. I wanted to be funny. And I wasn't willing to let anybody stand in my way on stage. And that kind of drive is hard because a lot of people don't have that drive. A lot of people just want to leapfrog to SNL. And the legend of John Lovitz was that he went through the Groundling school and never even made it into the company, that he got picked up for SNL based off his senior show, his advanced show. And we were in awe. Legendary, So I was taking the class there, and I'll never forget one of the first classes at the Groundlings. Towards the end, Jim gathered everybody and said, "Hey, we've got tickets for tonight's show, the main company, for students. So we didn't sell out. You can grab a ticket." So I grabbed a ticket for me and for Rachel. And when I tell you about this show that we watched, it's really hard to believe. But the show we were watching were the creme de la creme of the Groundlings. And we had heard this was the end of this particular era because a lot of these people had already got the call. And the cast that we saw that night included Will Ferrell, Sherry O'Terry, Phil Lamar, Michael McDonald, Jennifer Coolidge, and Robin, I want to say Robin Hitchcock, but I don't know if that's his name. But some of the funniest people I have ever seen in my life. Sherry O'Terry did a sketch that she ended up doing on SNL where she's a little girl who gets to visit the captain on an airplane, and she's the most annoying kid you've ever come across. And Will Ferrell played the pilot. I think on the TV show it was Chevy Chase. At least that's if I'm remembering it correctly. But he nearly broke character because she just was so over the top. And we also got to see Michael McDonald, who rose to fame on Mad TV, playing this little band child. I don't quite remember the character's name. But he was doing that night. Look what I can do. And I was just like, these guys are hysterical. And you know that scene in E.T. where they take E.T. out trick-or-treating and he sees Yoda and he starts going, home, home. Like, that's what I was doing. I was like, oh, I am home. I just want to move into the theater and become a Groundling right now. So I took the second class, and our teacher's name was Steve Cahalia. And, God, a really funny guy, just as good as Jim Jackman. I learned just as much from Steve. Steve's big thing was raise the stakes. And the way he presented it was so perfect. He would say, if you're in a scene and you open the refrigerator and you're out of butter, you're not out of butter. You're out of butter. We're out of butter. What are we going to do? That's the level you should take your scenes. And that really hit home. Like, that was so many years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday. And Steve was a great guy, funny guy, learned a lot. And by the time I ended up taking the third class, which was taught by a woman named Karen, very funny lady. She's in Pulp Fiction, and that was a big deal. I was like, my teacher's in Pulp Fiction. When Marcellus Wallace gets hit by a car and is laying on the street, there's a POV shot looking up, and she's the one that goes, oh, yeah, he's dead. And then Wallace gets up and chases after Butch again. But Karen was very good, and she had a character named Grandma Strawberry that was just the funniest thing ever, where she would go, she was this old Asian woman in like a shawl, and she would go, hello, hit me, hoo-hoo. And that's such a non sequitur and doesn't seem funny, but watching her perform it, like you couldn't laugh hard enough. And so I took the classes at the Groundlings, and what happened was life interrupted. And I've talked about it before, but Christmas '96, my mom died. And then January '97, I had my first child. So I went from being a kid to an adult overnight. All of the responsibilities of a life and a job and a wife and a kid and finding an apartment and no cushion, and you better get rolling now. And that slammed into me. And I put my dreams of SNL on hold, because they hadn't come to fruition yet, but I still had to take the advanced class, which was heavy duty. So what happened was I took a year off, and I finally got back into the Groundling situation. I called the theater, and they just sort of laughed at me, and they said, you're eligible to take the final class, but you haven't been taking the refresher classes. And what they wanted you to do was you had to go down like once or twice a week and pay $10 to just do improv exercises. So I'm game. I was like, I had dreams. I wanted to be a comedian on TV. And I saw that, Mad TV was ramping up. SNL was stronger than ever with some of the funniest people that had come and gone. Mike Myers had come and gone and become a big star. Will Ferrell was now a staple of TV. And Night at the Roxbury was on the horizon. So going back in just seemed like, I got to do this. I am going to make it. I'm funny and I'm fearless on stage, and let's do this. And what happened was I started hitting snags, and weird snags. During Karen's class, we had to do a number of scenes. The first was we had to do a monologue where we were a teacher, and we had to do a teacher that we emulated. So I did a guy I had in high school named Mr. David. He was our English teacher. And Mr. David was arguably the toughest teacher in high school. He was mean as a snake. He was sharp, and he took no funny business, and he knew right away if you were pulling something on him. And you know what? I started out hating him because he was so tough. And by the time I got to graduation, other than my drama teacher that I idolized, Mr. David was the guy that I respected the most. Kids, students, we need that drive, that push to keep going, to be better. And I don't think I'd be a writer today if it wasn't for Mr. David. Like, he pushed you to be the best that you could, and good enough wasn't. So when it came time to do a teacher on stage, I did Mr. David. And you know what? I have this recording somewhere. I will do my best to dig it up and try to get it up onto Facebook. But I came out and I played this guy who read punctuation. So we were reading The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, and I would go, I don't know it by heart, but it would, for an example, it went like this. I looked up, comma, and there on the windowsill, ... was a raven. And so it goes on and on and on where he keeps reading this punctuation, and it went over very well. It was very funny. And then he gets somebody in class is passing a note, so he gets the note from her, and he starts reading the note, and he's like, "Dear Cindy, no comma," and it gets worse from there. So it was very funny. But then I hit snags. Like another scene we had to do was, we had to pick a holiday, and we had to celebrate a holiday that didn't exist. So the holiday we picked was we were going to snake the sink day. And that was the day where this goofy set of relatives got together and they wore goofy hats and they celebrated that they were going to snake the sink. And it was stupid and it was silly, but it was very funny. But what they don't tell you is one of the main hurdles of being at the Groundlings is working well with others. And for the most part, I do, except when somebody's not pulling their weight or we're having to explain. I mean, there are a million reasons why somebody's the weak link in your team. But we had a woman, and she didn't want to hear any ideas at all. And she finally looked at me, and it was 2 guys, 2 girls. And she looked at me and she was like, "We're not going to let the penises write the scene." And I everything stopped. And I looked at her and I said, "What did you just say?" And I erupted and I was like, how can you just say something like that? That's the most sexist thing I've ever heard. And normally it's the guys being accused of that. But here's this girl smiling and spewing this bile that somehow my opinions and my comedy didn't matter because of my gender. It was really bizarre. So I went and got the teacher and I said, "Look, I'm an adult. I'm paying a lot of money to be here. And what's going on? Why is this happening?" And after that, like, I didn't want to work with that chick again. And I don't know if that's where I got a reputation of being a hothead or what, but it was just so bizarre. Like, who talks to somebody like that in an adult setting? You know, you wouldn't stand for it now. The way times have changed now. I'd have a lawyer. It would file something against her. I'd sue her for some fantasy crime, you know. But I used to think like just arguing would be enough, and sometimes it isn't. So there was also, I met a lot of really nice people. I got to know this guy named Bob Heaster, one of the funniest guys I've ever worked with. And we would do these scenes together that were just, we thought they were the funniest things ever. And the teacher would just shut us down. And I'll get to those in a second. I was listening to the Chive podcast, and they had Chris Parnell as their ghost. He's the guy who plays Dr. Leo Specimen on 30 Rock, and he came out of the Groundlings. And what was weird is I had known, like, I was on the cusp of the Will Ferrell, Sherry O'Terry dynasty. And then the team that came up after them was Chris Parnell, Anna Gasteyer, Rachel Dratch, I think. A whole bunch of really funny people. And they went all on to SNL. The class and the years that I were there, nobody moved on. Nobody moved on to SNL. Now, there were some people who got a lot of work out of it. A few of them got, bit parts in movies. Arguably, the most successful person out of our class was a very funny lady named Susan Yeagley, who I worked with her a lot. She was great, and she ended up marrying Kevin Nealon and having his baby. Kevin Nealon from SNL. That's fantastic. Congratulations. Not marrying somebody famous, but just finding somebody. That's worth a congratulations. But when I finally went back to school to take the advanced and final class, it was, again, quite expensive. And so what I did was, I took all of my Star Wars toys and I went to a collectible store and I sold them all. AT-ATs, Imperial Shuttles, Imperial Attack Base, Imperial Troop Transport, Twin Pod Cloud Car, X-Wing, Land Speeder, TIE Fighter, Advanced TIE Fighter, Darth Vader TIE Fighter, you name it. I sold it all. I took the money right to the Groundlings, and I paid the guy who was running the office, Patrick Bristow, very funny guy, who was in Showgirls and Austin Powers. He's the guy that alerts Dr. Evil when Austin and Vanessa infiltrate his base in the first one. This is Barlow. We've got a problem. Funny guy. Very funny guy. And I remember also there was another guy there in the company named Tim Bagley. He was in The Mask. He's one of the guys who rooks Stanley Ipkiss for his, Jim Carrey's car when they're trying to fix it. But Tim Bagley's a funny dude. He did a monologue once where it was just him on stage with a camera. And the idea was that he was going to take this family portrait. So he was talking to the audience as if they were the family. And in my mind, his comedy and his visual spacing were so good, I could see the whole family. And I just remember thinking, I want to be as good as Tim Bagley. What a funny, funny dude. Funny dude. A lot of these people I've become friends on Facebook with, so it's interesting how Facebook has made the world so much smaller, and people that you collide with so briefly end up somehow connected to you via the internet. That's such a weird thing that happened. None of us would have ever predicted that when we were using the internet to buy, records and, pornography. So I ended up back in the advanced class. And you know what? I can't think of the woman's name who was our teacher. She was really good, really sharp, mean, and on the ball. And it was what we needed because a lot of us were cocky, myself included. But she hated all of the scenes that Bob Heaster and I brought to the table because a lot of them were pop culture scenes. We brought her a scene where Fred and Barney from the Flintstones were going to swap wives. And I played Barney and Bob played Fred. He was like, Bon, I've been looking at your wife. That's a great idea, Fred, because I've been looking at Wilma, too. I've been thinking we ought to do a swap thing. Like, trade up? Like, she hated it. She was like, you're not doing that on our stage. I was like, this is funny. No, she didn't think it was funny. We brought another scene in where I was Luke and he was Darth Vader, and we were having dinner. And he was going to have me meet his new girlfriend. And he just thought the funniest line in the whole bit was, it opened with Darth Vader going, and I will have the baked potato with sour cream and no chives. And the guy's like, you got it, Darth. He walks off. So at the end of the bit, I'm trying to explain to him, he brings his girlfriend out. And it was Susan Yeagley in a cocktail dress and a C-3PO mask. And I'm like, you can't date a robot. It's against nature. Even though you're half robot, you can't date a robot. And he's like, you once kissed your own sister. And I was like, welcome to the family. And then lights out, obviously. But no, she wasn't buying that either. The teacher was like, you guys need to come up with something that's not a pop culture reference. Because I was, pushing the envelope. I did one called the MIBs, which was the men in Blockbuster. And what they did was try to prevent people from renting bad movies. She hated it. Hated it. At the end, I try to talk this woman out of renting a Pauly Shore movie. And I hold up this item. She's like, is that like one of those things that's going to flash me and make me forget things? I said, no, this is full of Windex. I'm going to squirt it in your eyes. It's going to allow me a chance to get away. And the teacher was like, no, try again. So Bob and I ended up doing a really funny scene where I was his lawyer and he was a criminal, and he was the worst criminal of all time. And he just didn't understand why he couldn't get on any talk shows. And I kept having to say, look, you're a terrible criminal. They only want good criminals. And at the end, the guard comes and takes him back to his cell, and he goes, mediocre man walking. So I had a good time, and I wrote some funny, funny stuff. I wrote a scene where I was a private eye, and this girl, it was Susan Yeagley. She comes in with a sandwich from the deli, and I think she's like this mobster's mall, and all this stuff is going on, but it's all in my head. So it's basically me just standing there while some guy goes, yeah, it was a hot day, and the dame came in holding a sandwich. It was, like a voiceover. And that was a lot of fun. I was trying to play with the conventions of the space because everybody was doing over the top, these loud, abrasive, what's what I'm looking for? Not caustic, but like aggravating characters. Like everybody wanted to play somebody who was angry and spewing venom about something. And I just wanted to have fun with being on stage and doing the scenes. And I think that might have been my downfall. Spoiler alert. So what happened was, and why I'm not a Groundling, is that I finally had to take the teacher aside. And how the Groundlings worked is you would show up at class and you had spent the week working with one or two of your other students, and you'd bring in a bunch of scenes to present. Now, this is before cell phones, before internet, before any of that. So everybody's just calling each other or making plans at class. And I soon discovered that no one was going to come work with me because I lived in Orange County and everybody else lived right in LA. So I was very honest. I said, I have no problem coming up to write with you guys. Like, no worries at all. You just tell me, well, we don't want you to have to come up. And I was like, well, that's what the class is. So I have no problem. I had a Suzuki Samurai and a portable radio, and I would blast the radio and fly into LA, shaking and shimmying the whole time, driving that car at its top speed of about 62 miles per hour. Thank you very much. It had a plastic top. You couldn't lock the doors because if somebody wanted in, they were just going to cut the top off. So I left the windows down, the doors unlocked, nothing to steal. Love that car. Finally drove it till it died. But I couldn't get anybody that wanted to work with me. There were a few. Susan Yeagley, Bob Heaster, Kiva Jump, I think her name was. I know her name was Kiva, but I'm not sure the last name. But Kiva was a cool girl. You've seen Kiva on a lot of commercials. She always plays a mom in like a car insurance commercial or some sort of food commercial. And you've seen Susan Yeagley in a lot of commercials too, and movies. But one time I drove and went to Kiva's house with a couple other people. And Kiva lived in like this really nice house. So it was cool. Like we're sitting in the one of the 12 living rooms and we're writing and we're putting this stuff together. It was a scene where we had to, the assignment was, it's a scene and somebody has to be lying. That's all you get. Someone has to be a liar. So we wrote a scene where we were cavemen and I was exposing this guy for lying about creating fire when I did. And I was wearing the lizard of lies. And it was a bizarro scene, We were in loincloths and I had a lizard on my head and it was a lot of fun. But writing it at Kiva's house was great. She had good snacks. It was a nice house. So I go to the bathroom and on the way back I see like Kiva in a family picture. And I walk out and I go, Kiva? Is this your dad in the picture? Yeah, it's my dad. I said, your dad is Gordon Jump? Mr. Carlson from WKRP in Cincinnati? She's like, well, yeah, now he's the Maytag washer guy. I said, you got to be kidding me. That's so awesome. But you know how people are. Nobody's impressed with their parents. So to her, it was that's just dad. But we were all impressed, especially since most of us would have killed to be on a sitcom, getting paid to be funny. And I had watched WKRP in Cincinnati for years. Johnny Fever and Les Nessman, and Lonnie Anderson. Oh, man. But that was fun. That was a good scene. And the guy that was in that scene with me, the one who played the liar about discovering fire, he did. Remember I talked about the assignment where we had to do a monologue based on one of our teachers. He did it on a drafting teacher, and it was one of those things where in the class, it was one of the funniest things we'd ever heard. And in the show, it didn't really click. But he played this drafting teacher who was chastising this student. He said, "Mr. Goddard, I've been watching you and your co-conspirators, and I'm going to critique the current assignment to design your dream house. And the line that brought the house down was, while I appreciate the magnitude of your fireman's pole, allowing you to slide from the 3rd floor down to the bottom floor, if you wish to ever visit those floors again, may I suggest putting in some stairs? And that was nearly 20 years ago, and I'm still laughing about it. Some stairs. But no, life progressed in the Groundlings, and part of the advanced class was you did like a few weeks and you put on a show, a few weeks you put on a show, and then they voted whether you became a Groundling or not. So you really did hit the ground running and get these shows up. And you invite your family and friends, and they come down, and everybody I knew would come down to see me be in this Groundling show. And I had to go talk to the teacher at one point. And I said, I got a problem. The only scenes that I'm in are the ones that I write. And how it worked is like somebody would bring a scene to class, and then either they had worked on it with somebody or they just needed people to be in it. So they would pull people to be in these scenes. And for the first show, I got cast in somebody's scene that was really funny. It was me and a really funny lady named Colleen Crabtree. And there was somebody breaking into our house. So we called 911. And the joke was 911 had been taken over by movie phone. So it was like, hello, if you'd like to report a crime, press 1. Doot. If somebody is stealing your car, press 2. If somebody is breaking into your house, press 3. Doot. And so the joke was that they were never going to send the police. And Colleen and I got more and more scared and screamed and agitated. And it was a lot of fun. But then for the second show, I didn't get put in any scenes. 0. Except the ones that I wrote. And I went to the teacher and explained the situation. I said, I'm not going to make it into the company because no one's going to see me on the stage except in the stuff that I write. And she took me aside and she was very frank with me. And she said, Jeff, there's a couple of problems here. I was like, what could be the problem? She says, well, the first problem is you live in Orange County. And I said, oh, okay. I said, I don't get why that's a big deal. She said, well, no one's going to come write with you. You have to come up here. I said, I have made myself available. I will drive here every day of the week if I have to write. I understand that. I've accepted that, and I embraced it. And she goes, well, the other problem is probably bigger. And I said, well, I can't wait to see what this is. And she said, people don't want to be on stage with you, Jeff, because you're too funny. I was like, come on, that's ridiculous. This is a cast full of professional people who want to be actors. And she goes, well, you're very good, and people are having a problem with that. I said, this is not supposed to happen at this level. I don't have any ill feelings towards anybody in this class. And it was really bizarre. And I know it sounds awful to say it on this podcast, like, well, Jeff didn't get put in any scenes because he was too good. But when you're depending on your other students to help you showcase yourself, when you're not getting that support, it sucks. And I just felt like I felt a little defeated. Like everybody's got their moments of showing off on stage. And if I don't get that, they're not going to vote for me. Because at the final show, they have like 4 or 5 of the main company Groundlings, and they sit in the back and they write notes. And then they vote. And you know what? I had my heart set on being a Groundling. I wanted to... What you do is you join the Sunday company. And you're in the Sunday company for like 6 months, and then they reevaluate. And eventually, you're either asked, they go, hey, you've done a great job, thanks, I think we're done. Or they allow you to move up into the main company, and you become a Groundling. And I really wanted to be a Groundling more than anything. Like, I just felt home. Like, I'm just home here. I love the theater. I love the vibe. I love being funny. And I felt like for the second show, I better work overtime if I'm going to make this dream a reality. So I pulled out all the stops and I wrote what I considered to be like the funniest things I could think of that showcased me. And the finale scene that I came up with was, first I tried a scene where I brought a girl home to meet mom and she was in an urn. But it was too much like this other guy's scene. Andy had done a similar scene. And Andy was a really funny guy. So it deferred to Andy to do that. I think at the end, they ended up putting like a little hat on the urn. I don't know. It was really bizarre. But I ended up doing two major scenes. And the first was a fake drug PSA called Don't Be a Jimmy. And the joke was, my brother Jimmy was into drugs, so I was doing all the things that would happen to you if you did drugs. You don't be a Jimmy. Like, he was paranoid. He had lost his job. Like, there were all these really funny vignettes that drove this point home, and it got funnier and funnier the longer it went on. And Bob Heaster narrated, and he did it so seriously that it got funnier and funnier. And the beauty part was the Groundling guys are hearing the laughter because my family's getting not only the joke of what's going on stage, but the idea that it's Jimmy and I'm taking a piss on my own sibling. So I had that, and that was pretty strong. And then the finale scene. And the finale scene was the stage opened, the lights came up, and you saw Christ in the Last Supper. And I was Jesus. I had a beard and a wig, and we were all in like robes and togas. And for a long few seconds, like the audience is just laughing already because it's ridiculous. And we're all in that tableau. It was really sharp. And what happened is I've got a loaf of bread. And I go, this is my body broken for you. And then one of the guys goes, are you all right? Did you broke your body? No. It's a metaphor. This is bread, but I've broken it as my body. Well, I don't understand. You appear to be okay. And it just went on, and it got more ridiculous as the scene went on, that they just weren't getting it. So I finally go, okay, enough with the bread. Enough with the bread. Enough with the body. Enough with the bread. So I hold up, this chalice, and I go, this is my blood. And the guy goes, well, I'm not drinking that. And it's not really my blood. Why would I serve you a cup of steaming hot blood? Well, you're the Son of God. You can do whatever you want. But I wouldn't do that. So we argued some more, and then finally I screamed, okay, stop. And then there's a guy down front, and he's got a loaf of bread and a cup of wine, and he's just crunching and slurping. And I said, you guys don't get it. That guy gets it. He's not having a problem. He understands everything I'm trying to say. Why can't you be more like him? Why can't you all be more like Judas? Lights out. Brought the house down. And I remember going backstage, just like in a movie, wig comes off, beard comes off, and I just felt like nailed it. I felt so good. I nailed it. Show ends, we take our bows, people are cheering, everyone's fun. There were some really great, amazingly talented people in this class, and we were all destined for greatness. That's, the sky's the limit. So what happened was, a couple days later, I get a phone call, and it's from the teacher, and she's like, hey, I need to go over the what went down at the theater. And I was like, I can't wait. This is going to be great. And she's like, well, everybody really enjoyed what you brought. And she gave him her personal opinion on my strengths, my weaknesses. It was very fair and balanced. And then finally she goes, and regarding the Sunday company, and I was like, here it comes. She goes, the vote didn't go your way, Jeff. And I said, how can that be? How can that be? She goes, well, everybody agreed that the Last Supper scene was the funniest of the night. And I said, well, I wrote it by myself. And I was Jesus. How can the funniest scene of the night not carry enough weight to get me into the Sunday company? I said, it's a 6-month gig that doesn't pay anything, and I want to do it. I want to come down 3 nights a week to write and rehearse, and then I'll be there Sunday to do this show to show you I'm committed. I want to do this. She goes, well, what happened was, even though the scene was very well received, nobody knew who you were, because in that scene you were wearing a wig and a beard, and they couldn't carry that over into the other scenes to give you the vote. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. And she said, Jeff, I sympathize with you. I do. And occasionally this happens, but there's really nothing to be done. You've run through the school, the vote came up, and you didn't get the votes. And I felt pretty ill. I felt pretty darn depressed, like all I've ever wanted to do, and it certainly at that point, was to be a writer, be funny, be on stage. And at work, I was just a shift lead, a shift lead. I had not even become a supervisor yet. I was just a shift lead, so there weren't any performing opportunities. So this was it. My improv group is dissolved. My Groundling dreams were trashed. And at insult to injury, my Star Wars collection was now in the case at a comic book shop. So I felt pretty bad. And I'll tell you, what brought me out of it came in a really surprising way. The first was I got a bouquet of flowers from my stepdad, and that's my sister's father. And the card simply read, "They didn't deserve you." And I'm a guy, flowers aren't my thing, but that felt really nice. But the bigger comfort came just a day later. And what happened was I'd been working at Knott's Berry Farm at Mystery Lodge. And the guy who built Mystery Lodge it's a company called BRC. And it's owned and operated by a guy named Bob Rogers. Now, I had met Bob Rogers, I think, a couple of times. And he sent a couple of guys down to Knott's because the way that Mystery Lodge works is very particular. And training somebody on how to do it can be extensive. So they needed somebody who understood how it worked. And I'm talking in code, obviously, because I have to. So they came down and presented, like, we're doing this special weird project and we need somebody. And I looked at it and I said, I'm your guy. I can do it. This is a few weeks before Groundlings. So I went through a rehearsal process with them, and we did this mini presentation show that lasted about 90 seconds. It was a very intense 90 seconds with a lot of special effects and a lot of money riding on it. And they were paying me quite well. And so after being rejected by the Groundlings, I picked myself up. Now, I was happy because I was driving to Burbank to a warehouse studio to do this project. And I'm standing there, and they had it was a full setup with a craft service table, and it was a lot of work, long hours to make sure this happened. And what happened was Bob Rogers came in. He wasn't normally on the project. He was overseeing it. He came in and he wanted to talk to me. And it's hard to describe how smart a guy like Bob Rogers is. He didn't attain his success on luck. This is a guy who's incredibly smart. If you look at BRC and look him up on the web, BRC, Bob Rogers Company, look at some of the projects they've been involved with. They're as big as Gary Goddard, Landmark Entertainment, Garner Holt. Like, this is theme park and themed entertainment at its finest. And he's an intelligent guy, and I do owe him a lot in a couple of areas of my life. But in this case, he could sense there was something going on, and he just was making small talk while they set up lights or something. And he's like, "What's going on?" And I was like, I'm a little down. Like, I took this class at the Groundlings, and I was hoping to get accepted in the company. And I explained what had gone down. And Bob looked at me for a long second, and he said, let me see if I get this straight. You're upset because you don't get to work for free for the next 6 months. I said, well, when you put it like that, the answer is still yes, but I see what you're saying. And he goes, we're paying you a pretty good amount today to act and to be funny, aren't we? I said, yeah. Yes, you are. And he said, well, out of your classmates then, who's the big winner? Who's the working actor today? I said, I think it's just me. He goes, let's go do this project. And you know what? That was one of the most profound things anyone has ever told me. For a guy to look me in the eye and go, who cares what's going on over there? Today, you're getting paid to act. What you want to do, you're getting to do it. What are you complaining about? And he didn't do it in that tone, but I got the gist, and I needed it. And you know what? I went over and I did that show, and I did that show so well that project was greenlit almost immediately based on the hard work of not only the cast and crew, but me personally and everybody involved. And that show is now the Woody Woodpecker Animation Celebration at Universal Studios Japan. And it's still running. So I'm very proud of that. And I'm very honored to have been part of a project that came along at just the right moment in time to remind me that every time a door closes, another one does open. And that's the way life works. And I couldn't be more grateful for what Bob Rogers has done for me. And when I talk about my novels, his role in that is even bigger. But looking back at the Groundlings, it's bittersweet. Like, I still enjoy the people that come out of there. Kristen Wiig came out of there. John Paragon. Some of the funniest people on the planet have walked the halls of the Groundlings. And though I did not make the Sunday company, or obviously the main company, I still am proud of the training that I got there, the skills that I learned there to be funny, to be a better writer. And the teachers that I had there were all very good. And while I'm still saddened that I didn't become a big star on SNL, I didn't become the next John Lovitz, maybe it's good. I mean, after what they did to John Lovitz at the SNL 40th and pronounced him dead while he was sitting in the audience, it's pretty funny. But, yeah, really bizarre. Really bizarre. And it's just one of those things. It's a life lesson. Like, if you're a young guy listening to this and you think, like, I'm going to take these classes and that'll be it, take it from me. It's not always it. And who knows what direction my life would have taken had I attained the Groundling moniker. But, as Belloc says, alas, cherie, is not to be. And that's just the way it goes, man. And not everybody's mega famous around the world for comedy. Some of us are just minorly famous for being able to talk for nearly an hour about going to the Groundling school. But if you're an aspiring comedian, there's no better place to learn. But you could also check out Second City, or Improv Olympics West, or any of the other really good improv comedy schools. And it's all good. There's no such thing as bad training, because you're going to learn something from somebody somewhere. And I know that Bob is still plucking away at it and still performing. So I give it up for him, and all the people that I went to Groundling school with. I met some really cool people. And not the funniest, but an interesting story was the first day of class. There was a guy in the class with us, and he was really loud and abrasive, and he was cutting up and making basically that's what she said type jokes, like just the right off the bat, knee-jerk, dumb jokes. And I watched him for a while, and I thought to myself, like, first, it's going to sound terrible, but I'm funnier than that guy, but I don't want to be that guy. And as the class broke up into groups to write, I thought that everybody would gravitate this guy because he was loud, abrasive. But in the first class, they shunned him because he was too over the top, too abrasive. And I learned a lesson that day that sometimes shutting your mouth says more than opening it. And I gained a lot of respect out of that first class by being the opposite of that guy. So it's not always good to be the loudest in the room. And I know that's weird advice coming from me, but that's sometimes the way to go. And I've been to Hollywood hundreds of times since my time in the Groundlings. And every time I drive by the theater there on Melrose, like I get a double whammy. I get a sense of pride and a little bit of, oh, what could have been? What could have been had I done that? But I have no regrets because I took that school and I performed and I behaved exactly the way I wanted to be. And if people didn't want to write with me and didn't want to put me in their scenes, then that's on them, you know? And so, I decided, fine, I'll be Jesus. And I was Jesus. Anywho, I got to wrap it up, guys. I'm losing my voice. I am Jeff Tucker. I am the voice of 91 Reasons. Thank you for listening. Thanks for everybody's support on the show, for the amazing people on Patreon who have pledged. We've got episodes coming up that are directly resulting from our Patreon pledges, and I can't wait to unveil those. March is going to be a crazy busy month for Patreon episodes. We've got, let's see if I can get this right. Hindel's got an episode coming up that he's pledged for, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Patrick's got an episode coming up that he pledged for his birthday, no less. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then on the Homestuck side, Vriska has an episode that was pledged for. Michael Bondi's got an episode. That's four. Excuse me. 4 episodes that are pledged that we will get out as soon as I can. I know I've been a little slow, but I'm back in the saddle, folks, and we're going to bang these out of here. We also want to thank John, Kristen, Sean, David, Jeremy, Q11 TV, Colleen and Rustlin, Michael, Eric, and David, who've all pledged on Patreon. Your support means the world to me. If you'd like to join the fun and have your own episode, check out Patreon. That's patreon.com and look up 91 Reasons. Also, thanks to everyone who supported my Kickstarter for my novels. It nearly doubled its goal. That's fantastic. We are going to use that money to get a table at WonderCon and have enough product and all the things we need to promote the book and the podcast at WonderCon, and that will be a lot of fun. This show wouldn't be possible without all the amazing people who contribute in every single way that they can, whether you are pledging $1 or more, or you're sharing statuses on Twitter and Facebook. I appreciate everything that people do for this show. You cannot know how gratifying it is to launch these shows into the air and not know where they land, and then see the actual outcome of people who are influenced and inspired by this show. So thank you all for your support and the amazing memories that people have been sharing with me on Facebook. I get letters that are long and detailed of growing up and how our situations are similar. And Sir Klinksalot, who's like, every time you post an episode, it's like you're talking about my life. And I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again. It just goes to show you that we weren't alone out there. We were growing up and having the same experiences. I'm just the dummy who's sitting alone and talking about it. So thanks so much for everybody for your support. The Kickstarter funded, and that's great. Patreon is continuing. We also have a crazy project, the Time Box. If you'd like a Time Box, which is a box of pop culture paraphernalia, go on our Facebook page and scroll down, and you can find out how to get one for $9.10 through PayPal. It's very easy. We'll mail it right out to you, and you get a box of stuff that I've collected over the years, and it's all very cool. If you're on YouTube, check out Q11 TV, my friend Robbie's channel. He's always putting up really funny sketches and videos. And he's the next wave of guys who carrying the mantle of SNL and the Groundlings and Second City, and guys who sit around and go, you know what would be funny? And then what Robbie does is what a lot of us don't do. He follows through. You know, he has stuff going on. You know, congratulations for all your videos and getting them finished and edited and up, because it's a lot of work. You know, I do this silly little podcast and edit audio together, and it's a lot of work. So I've done a few videos, and they're just massive amounts of work. Like I said, we'll be at WonderCon. We'll be promoting my 3 novels, The Sixth Key, The Lost Station, and The Infinite Backward. They're available right now on Amazon.com, or they will be available at the show. You can get a signed copy. You can come up and meet us. WonderCon Easter weekend at the Anaheim Convention Center. We'll also be promoting 91 Reasons, both regular and Homestuck versions. And then right after that will be the Friday of Celebration, the Star Wars convention. We'll be at that one too. There's so much coming up. I got my Comic-Con tickets. I can't wait. We're gonna go to Comic-Con this year, like every year. Can't afford the table because I can't afford the room, and the room is where all the money is. So, but we're shooting for 2016, having a presence, a little tiny one, somewhere in the back, like next to a bathroom at Comic-Con. But you never know. You never ever know. If you know somebody that would like this show, forward it to them. Let them know about it. You know, we'd love to get picked up by Podcast One or The Nerdist or somebody who'd like to host this show. You can also check out Darkest Hours. They are now airing 91 Reasons, I believe, every Saturday night. The link is on our Facebook page. I think I've rattled off enough plugs. What else can I plug? I don't know. I got a lot of stuff going on. I don't want to end the show. We're going to keep talking. Oh, my God. Hey, I've become an SNL sketch. I never know when to end and just say, hey, that's enough. We're just going to kill it and pound it into the ground. Did I just say that out loud? I did. That's rough. All right. I am the voice. I am Jeff Tucker, and the show you're listening to is called what? You said it in your head, didn't you? 91 Reasons.
We could have been anything that we wanted to be. And I'm not saying we should. But if we try it, we learn to abide it. We could be the best at being good guys.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?